Hey, what's up everybody? This is Osterberg501 and today I want to go over all the different types of loot that the Godfall has to offer. The different stats, the different perks, all of the different equipable item slots, and then I want to go over some specific examples of this different loot. Now there is more customization past just the different loot you will acquire in the game, such as the skill system, but I wanted to focus this video on just the loot that you will be getting from killing enemies and looting chests. Now luckily, one of the developers actually laid out the different layers of loot in the game and gave a brief overview, so I'm going to go over that first, and then we're going to go more specifically into all the different pieces of loot, give some examples, and go over their different stats and perks. First off, they have layer 1, which are weapons. There are over 120 unique weapons in Godfall across the 5 weapon classes. Every weapon has a specific name and lore associated with it. Every weapon has a primary trait that is completely unique to it, along with secondary traits that are rolled from a pool of shared traits, and you can have 2 weapons equipped at any time in your loadout. So essentially every weapon is going to have its own unique perk that's like a bigger passive, and then it will have secondary stats that are just shared between all of the different weapons in the game. Now layer 2 is trinkets. There are 3 types of trinkets: amulets, rings, and charms. Like weapons, every trinket has a unique primary trait associated with it. Players can equip 2 rings, 1 amulet, and 1 charm in their loadout. So these trinkets are going to be pretty similar to weapons. They all have their own unique primary trait, which is a substantial passive, and then up to 3 secondary stats. Now something that's interesting between weapons and trinkets is weapons have a DPS stat on them that does one of the different elemental damages, so whether it's water or fire, and trinkets in that place have an increase to one of your primary stats, whether it's might, vitality, or spirit. Now layer 3 is lifestones. Similar to other pieces of loot, the lifestone will have primary and secondary traits. However, this particular piece is unique in the sense that it also serves as a player's self-heal. There's some really neat loot triggers tied to lifestones that make self-preservation a balancing act in Godfall. Players can equip 1 lifestone in their loadout. Lifestones have a set amount of charges, and charges are restored through combat. Now layer 4 is battle banners. Battle banners are another charge-based piece of loot similar to the lifestone. When placed, these banners can provide buffs to yourself and nearby allies, or debuffs to nearby enemies. Battle banners are one of the most powerful co-op tools that a player will have, and that being said, they will still pack a powerful punch in solo play. Now I could not find any screenshots showing the actual item UI of a battle banner, and it doesn't specifically say here if they will have the primary trait or secondary stats, so I'm not 100% certain on that. Now layer 5 is the Augment Constellation. An Augment Constellation is essentially an empty skill grid that the player fills in themselves. They fill the constellation with augments, unique pieces of loot that provide incredibly powerful benefits. Now this is something that's kind of akin to the skill system that I didn't want to go over in this video, so I wanted to focus more on the actual augments that you put inside of the Augment Constellation, because that is the things that you'll actually be looting from killing enemies or looting chests. Now each Valorplate has a unique Augment Constellation. Augment Constellations are made up of 10 nodes that will either be red, green, blue, or white. Red increases a player's might, green increases vitality, blue increases spirit, and white can be any augment. Augments will also have a power drain value associated with them, and your Valorplate will have a power capacity. The most powerful augments will have a higher power drain. Players will be challenged to carefully deliberate where to best invest their Valorplate's power. As you level up, your power capacity will also increase. We're definitely going to go into more specifics with these augments because we do have some screenshots showing the different stats and traits that can be on these as well. So that is an overview of all the different loot in the game, and now we can go into some more specifics. So every piece of loot in the game gets more stats depending on the rarity. So if you have an uncommon item or a green, it will only have its primary on it, and then every rarity up will also add a secondary stat to it. At legendary, that will be a primary trait and 3 secondary stats. So I wanted to start with the weapons. Now there are 5 different weapon classes that all have their own different attacks and focuses on what they're good at, but I wanted to keep that out of this video because that could be a whole video on itself and more focus on just the overall general stats and perks and how the weapon items themselves work. So that overview we already went over gives a pretty good idea of what all the different loot types are supposed to do, but I want to go over some examples and go over some more of the specific stats for all the items that we have gotten screenshots of their actual tooltip or UI. So first off, we have the sword here, the Fire of Hate, and its primary is whenever you defeat an ignited enemy, the enemy explodes and deals 563 fire fire damage to nearby enemies, the explosion has a 50% chance to inflict ignite. So that is the different elements in the game. This one, it deals 63 fire DPS. The numbers will change. This is a level 25 and max level that we have been shown is 50. Secondary stats. Now all the secondaries are randomly rolled and shared between everything. So this is just some examples. 19% soul shatter buildup, 14% weapon technique charge speed, and 5% critical hit chance. So a really cool sword. Like we've gone over with the overview, pretty much every item we have gone over, except I think the banners specifically say they have their own primary effect on them and then randomly rolled secondary traits. So this is a pretty good example of what you can expect on the different weapons in the game. Something that's pretty interesting is we also have gotten screenshots of the crafting system and showing how you can upgrade, say, an epic to a legendary. Now, I'm not exactly certain if this is across the board, but we have a screenshot of showing the same Warhammer being upgraded from epic to legendary. So I'm not certain if you could, say, find all of the legendary weapons in lower versions, in lower rarities, because here we have the Tormentor, a Warhammer that's being upgraded from epic to legendary, and it keeps the same primary trait because it's unique to that named weapon, and then the secondary stats are randomly rolled. I'm assuming that, say, most of or all of the legendary items in the game can also be found in those lower rarity versions that will just have a lesser version of that primary trait, and then again, like everything else, the randomly rolled secondary traits. Next, we have a legendary charm. Now you can have one charm equipped at a time, and this is the Ash Meteorite. Now its primary is whenever you hit a weak point, shoot a projectile that deals 621 physical damage. Now what's interesting to note, and what you'll see as we start going through the items, is that the actual stats and primary traits on all the different items are as substantial as everything else. So something like a primary on a charm or an amulet is just as strong, or can be just as strong, as the primary on your main weapons. Now, like we talked about in the overview, the trinkets have an increase to 1 of your primary stats. So this has 96 might on it, unlike the weapons that just have their different elemental DPS on them. Some more examples of secondary stats: 20% soul shatter buildup, 5% critical hit chance, and 6% chance to inflict bleed. So next up we have an amulet. Now amulets are one of the trinkets, and you can have one amulet equipped at a time. This has 96 vitality on it. Its primary is 14% chance to summon a spirit warrior ally whenever you soul shatter an enemy, which is pretty cool. Some of the primary traits are really interesting. Some more examples of secondaries: 22% earth resistance, 24% fire resistance, and 22% air resistance. Now those would just be resistances to different elemental types of damage you could take. Something that's not explained but seems to be shown in some of these screenshots is that some of these different trinkets, their secondary stats may be just rolled between each other and not shared with other things. So this amulet has just all resistances on it. I could definitely see amulets being the slot you have that is where the majority of resistance is coming from, that amulets pretty much just roll in between those resistances, but not 100% certain on that because it wasn't explicitly stated anywhere. Now I could not find any screenshots showing the actual tooltip and stats of banners or lifestones. Now, like we went over, lifestones have the primary trait and secondary stats like everything else, so you could assume that those will be pretty similar to all the other gear pieces. Banners, we have no idea. They didn't explicitly say if they have stats or traits like everything else or not. But now we can go into augments. Now augments go into the constellation system that has 10 nodes in every Valorplate. They have a specific amount of drain. Like we went over, all your Valorplates and constellation systems have a certain amount of energy. All these different augments will have a specific amount of drain. They will have a main stat on them as well. This one here, this Karmic Soul, has 65 spirit on it. And then these also have their own primary stats and secondary traits. So this is restore a lifestone charge whenever you place your banner. And this is just in that constellation tree. And this shows that this can also boost or buff different pieces of gear that you have equipped, buffing your banners or making your lifestone get a charge when you place your banner. So synergizing different pieces of loot that you will have equipped, which is really interesting. Secondary stats: 19% over health gain from banners, 11% Archon Fury charge speed. So again, those randomly rolled secondary stats. So pretty interesting. This one is one of the blue augments augments, like we went over, there's 3 different colors. There's blue, green, and red, and then white you can place any augment in. And then we have a legendary augment called Concentration. Now this has 30 drain and 72 spirit on it. And the primary is whenever you use your Lifestone, create sacred ground that restores 110 health per second to you and your allies, which seems like an incredibly strong primary trait. And secondary, plus 12% shield technique charge speed, plus 23% takedown damage, plus 19% physical damage. So just looking at some of these secondary traits across all these items, or the secondary stats, they can be incredibly strong, and there's going to be a ton of farming to get the absolute best secondary stats you can get. And the primaries are also much more substantial, more gameplay changing effects. And it's really cool that pretty much every item we've gone over so far actually shares the different statting on them. So they all have up to 3 secondary sets, and they all have their own unique primary trait that will in some way change up your gameplay style and add a massive amount of power to your build. And this is all the information I could find for the different loot in the game. Now there's a lot more customization that also ties in and synergizes with all of this loot that I want to save for different videos, like the skill system, like your Valorplate, different constellation systems, like whatever weapon class you are using. But I want to keep that for different videos and focus this video on the specific stats, the primary traits, and all of the loot that you'll actually be acquiring from combat or looting chests in the game. Subscribe if you want to see more Godfall or other videos. Leave a like if you liked the video. Leave a comment down below what you guys think about all the different loot in Godfall, and thanks for watching.